All right. So we're going to start with our final panel session of the day. And I want to thank everyone for your patience as well as your attendance. First off, we have Mr. Jonathan Corso from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And he is the Georgia representative for EDA, and his office is in Atlanta. He provides applicants with technical assistance, reviews funding requests, and makes recommendations for funding. Mr. Corso received his Master's of Public Administration from Syracuse University and his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Massachusetts. Next, we have Mr. Michael Burns, who is the Senior Advisor to the Regional Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 4 in Atlanta, and he also serves as the CUP Program Manager. Mr. Burns is an engineer by trade, having earned a BS degree from the U.S. Naval Academy. He spent 8 years as an engineer on 3 different ships, traveling throughout East Asia, the South Pacific, and Europe during his time in the Navy. Currently, Mr. Burns is the National Program Manager for the College Underserved Community Partnership Program, which engages colleges and universities to provide free technical assistance to underserved communities. And then yours truly, I will be taking the liberty to talk about the USDA program on behalf of Andrew Hayes, who is Georgia's USDA representative. He could not be here due to a commitment, but he did send some information, and I will be going over that, as well as some programmatic information from NTIA as well. So for this final session, the most important session, so when you see everyone who left earlier, you tell them you all got funded, they didn't stay. But seriously, we always use, and I've traveled with Mr. Burns, and I've met with Jonathan Corso, and there's a running joke that we use from the federal government. We're from the federal government, and we're here to help. But in this case, it's true. It is very true. There are a number of different federal programs that are designed to assist you. We are here as your local representatives to aid you and walk you through that process. And again, if you have any questions, you may also reach out to us directly. So without further ado, I will introduce to you and bring up to the dais Jonathan Corso.
Everybody, again, my name is Jonathan Corso. I'm the Georgia representative for the U.S. Economic Development Administration. We're a very small agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I work out of the Atlanta Regional Office. So EDA has a number of different grant programs. These are all grants. We don't do loans. We have construction grants. These are typically used for public infrastructure projects like water, sewer, road, rail. We also fund the construction of small business incubators, workforce development centers. We can do machinery and equipment, and we can do broadband. What we need in order to participate in any construction project is we need committed private sector jobs and private investment. We also have non-construction grants. These are typically used for feasibility studies, technical assistance reports, engineering studies, tourism studies. We can do broadband studies. What we need to ensure is that any study that we do, whether it's broadband or anything else, it needs to be very narrowly focused on economic development. We can't do a community development type technical assistance project. It has to be focused on economic development. It can indirectly benefit other aspects of the community, but it does need to have that economic development focus for us. Now, in 11 years at EDA, I can only think of 2 projects that I've done in Georgia that are broadband related. One was in Decatur County, a very small $60,000 grant that provided broadband to an industrial park, and a much larger grant that I'll talk more about in a minute to the city of Albany that buried some fiber optic cable lines in the city. We can certainly do broadband. I don't know why we haven't done more. I can only imagine it's the public ownership piece that is causing, maybe some concerns with that or some issues. We also have a jobs and private investment requirement, and perhaps that's been an issue as well, but we certainly can do broadband. So eligible applicants to EDA include public bodies such as cities, counties, and development authorities, Native American tribes, economic development districts. In Georgia, those are your 12 regional commissions. Colleges and universities are eligible, And nonprofits are eligible provided that they receive local government support. At a minimum, if a nonprofit's going to apply to EDA, we need to get a support letter from the chief elected official from where the project is physically located. We just want to ensure that the nonprofit is not engaged in a project that they're opposed to, so we get that buy-in from the local government. So to be eligible for an EDA grant, you must be located in an economically distressed region. We have a number of ways of measuring economic distress, but the simplest, most straightforward way is we look at county level per capita income or unemployment data. If you have especially low per capita income, you can qualify for an EDA grant. If you have especially high unemployment, you can qualify for an EDA grant. You don't need to meet both criteria, but you should probably meet one. If you don't, we can still qualify you based on a self-described special need. We have a lot of different variables that you can present to us that explains what your economic distress might be. Project may be physically located in an opportunity zone. You may have suffered substantial 12-month job loss. You may have had a natural disaster. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about our special disaster supplemental we received from Congress back in July. It's a great benefit for those of you who were impacted by Hurricane Michael. I'll talk a lot about that in a minute. So it's very easy to submit to EDA an eligible project, much more difficult to submit to EDA a competitive project. We have a number of factors we look at when we consider project competitiveness. The first thing we look at is the cost per job. EDA likes a very low cost per job, and for EDA that's about $5,000. We also like private investment, high private investment, and for EDA, high private investment is 22 private dollars for every EDA dollar. So if you request $1 million from EDA, then on average, we're going to want to see about 200 jobs and about 22 million in private investment. It varies from project to project, but that's generally what we try to achieve. In addition, we have some investment priorities that are specific to EDA. With every new administration, we have new investment priorities, but these are things that we look for, qualities in a project, above and beyond the cost per job and the private investment piece. So right now, a couple of our investment priorities might be disaster recovery. If your project is one that recovers or helps you recover from a natural disaster, that's a priority of ours. If it builds resilience into the project, or future disasters don't have quite the impact, that's a priority for us. Any kind of infrastructure that you're proposing, if the project is somehow involved with workforce development or manufacturing, those are priorities. If you're working with a company that's exporting outside of the United States, that's a priority. If you're working with a foreign company that is investing directly in the United States, that's a priority. If your project is physically located in an opportunity zone, that's a priority. So to be eligible, you have to meet at least one of those priorities. To be competitive, you should probably meet 3 or 4. It's really not a high bar to get over, but those are some things you need to focus on in an application. Cash match, regulations allow for in-kind, but cash is more competitive. We typically fund a project on a one-to-one basis. So if you have a need for a $1 million broadband system, our grant is $500,000. Your non-federal cash match is $500,000. We do accept federal loans, so if it's a USDA loan, that's an acceptable form of match. Non-entitlement CDBG is an acceptable form of match. If you're from up north, ARC is an acceptable form of match. But most other federal, mainly it's earmarks, is what that whole piece was put in there for as far as non-federal match. But state, local, private's all acceptable forms of match. Distressed community, the more economically distressed you are, the more competitive your proposal is. We weigh very heavily in favor of counties that are economically distressed. So our disaster supplemental, if you were a part of Hurricane Michael, you remember, you don't need to see this map, you know quite well. But these are the counties, these shaded in yellow and pink are the ones that are eligible for our disaster supplemental. There's about 69 or 70 counties. I'll go into more detail on the next slide about what that means. But if you're not located in a disaster-eligible county, you still benefit from because any project that we generate in a disaster-impacted county is going to go directly into that disaster supplemental fund. Our regular program fund is going to be available to everyone else, but you won't be competing with those disaster-eligible counties. So it frees up a lot of resources for a lot of different folks. Last year we had a disaster supplemental, and it had that impact. We were able to fund a lot of projects last year in non-disaster eligible counties that we wouldn't have otherwise because we were doing so much work in the disaster eligible counties. So specific to this allocation, it was passed in July of 2019. It covers all natural disasters in 2018 and 2019, including those natural disasters that have not yet occurred. So if we have a tornado or flooding event between now and the end of the year, and you're not eligible now, you will be at the end of the year. What it doesn't cover is it doesn't cover future hurricanes, strangely enough. Dorian didn't cause a natural disaster impact in Georgia, at least not yet. They haven't declared it yet. But had it, you would not be eligible under this particular disaster supplemental. Don't ask me why, that's just the way the law was written. But in any case, the only natural disaster that is eligible is Hurricane Michael and those counties in the previous map. So the Atlanta region, which is our 8 states, received $147 million, which is the exact same amount we received last year for Hurricanes Irma and Maria. We have about 735 counties in our 8 states. Roughly 2/3 of those were eligible under last year's supplemental. This year it's a little less than half. So same amount of money, much fewer eligible areas, so I would imagine it's going to be a lot less competitive than last year, because last year we left a lot of good products on the table that we just couldn't get to because we ran out of money. We spent our disaster supplemental last year in about 6 or 8 months. This one I would expect would last a little longer, but if you have a project, I would recommend getting it to us as soon as possible, because you don't want to be left out. Same as our regular programs, we fund construction and non-construction projects, so there's no differences there. The only difference we do have between our disaster program and our regular program is if you're applying under disaster, we do have a 1-page, what we call nexus statement. And that nexus statement essentially covers 3 things, if you did it properly. It covers an explanation of the disaster that you suffered. It covers how the project mitigates the impact of that disaster, and it describes how you're making your region disaster resilient so that you don't suffer the same consequences in the future if you suffer a similar disaster. So if you cover those 3 elements in your 1-page nexus statement, then you've satisfied that requirement, and we can move on to other things. It's not a very high bar. If you have trouble writing one, I can certainly help. I helped plenty of folks last time around, but that's the only additional requirement we have. So the grants under our disaster supplemental can exceed $3 million. Our regular programs, $3 million is the cap. Our largest grant last year was to the City of Albany, $8 million, which is the largest grant I've ever worked on. And what that grant did was it buried electric cables and fiber optic cables underground in a 30-block area around Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital. Our average disaster grant last year was about 2.5. Our average regular program grant was about 1.8, so it did provide a little extra, some extra resources for folks if they did come through the disaster supplemental. Grant rates 50 to 80%. Under our regular programs, 50% is more normal. Under our disaster programs, we go up to 80%. You should always ask for 80%. We don't want to nickel and dime you, but we may negotiate something down if it's not appropriate. But you should not negotiate with yourself. You should ask for the full amount and let us tell you if we can do it or can't do it. We're not going to reject an application because you asked for too much. We'll have a conversation and we'll come together on what may be appropriate for your application. So the application process, it's a rolling deadline. You apply whenever you're ready. You do need to be mindful of the federal fiscal year, which began yesterday. It's October 1st. Like most years, we're operating under a continuing resolution, which means they pay our salaries and keep the lights on. That's about all we can do. We can't really make awards until we have a budget. A budget could come tomorrow. It could come in, well, last year it was like March. Last year we had a couple continuing resolutions. We had a shutdown. We had another continuing resolution. If you applied last year in, say, July, you weren't awarded until April or May. Most times we're able to go through the entire process in 90 to 120 days. If we don't have a budget, we can't do that. We do our reviews, we conduct our due diligence, and then we sit and wait until we have a budget and we have money that we can award. That's true of our regular programs. Our disaster supplemental, it's on the street, it's ready to go. If you apply today and you have a competitive project, we should be able to do something in 90 to 120 days. So when you submit an application, it goes through a preliminary review, which is essentially me. I look at it and determine if it's complete and if it's competitive. I'll send you an email, and if it's neither of those things, I'll outline in hopefully a pretty clear bullet-pointed email about what's missing from the application and what are some things you can do to make the application more competitive. Once you're happy with the results and I'm happy with the results, it goes to our investment review committee. They score the application. They take my recommendation, which is going to fund the project. They take my recommendation under consideration. They vote up or down. Assuming they vote up, it goes to our regional director, who has the ultimate say. If he votes up, then you get what we call a further consideration letter. The further consideration letter you receive tells you that we like the project, EDA loves the project, we want to fund it, we need 10, 12, maybe 15 additional items so that we can complete our due diligence and make the award. Give you 30 days to turn that information around. You submit it, we review it, it goes through our engineer, our environmental officer, our area director, our regional counsel. If it all checks out, you get your award. Again, that whole process takes 90 to 120 days if everything checks out. You receive the application, or you apply under grants.gov. If you don't have an account, you should set one up. It takes a few days, maybe a couple of weeks to get that going. If you're not set up, you should do that, whether you apply for EDA or not. But you apply electronically through grants.gov, and we receive it in that format. Our webpage is eda.gov, has a lot of good information about the agency and the application process, so be sure to check that out. And lastly, my contact information. If you have an idea for a project or anything for that matter, give me a call, send me an email. I can probably come visit you where you're at, or you can come to me in Atlanta, that's fine. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the agency or application process. I also strongly encourage you to contact your regional commission. There's 12 of them in Georgia. Every single one of them receives a planning grant from EDA, and with that planning grant, they provide economic development services, and among those services are writing applications and managing awards. So they'll do it for a small fee, but definitely contact them. If you're interested in applying. There's private grant consultants who also do a good job, but I strongly recommend you contact your regional commission. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Burns from the Environmental Protection Agency. Before I started my remarks, I wanted to ask everybody, look to the person to the left of you, please, if you would. Now, look to the person to the right of you, if you would, please. Congratulations, you're the one that's still awake. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Michael Burns, and I'm going to talk to you about the College Underserved Community Partnership Program, and I'm also going to talk to you, most importantly, and specifically in reference to this topic, about a collaboration we're doing with the NTIA. So, College Underserved Community Partnership Program was specifically designed to provide technical assistance to underserved communities. I heard a lot of talk about feasibility studies and economic development, and if you're the city of Atlanta, that's great. You got staff, you got money, you got everything you need to do all that stuff. But if you're Midway, Georgia, or Ray City, Georgia, or someplace else under 5,8, see, I see hands waving, you don't have the staff and you don't have the funds. So how do you go after the resources you need if you don't have the ability to figure out what you need and how to go after it? This is what the program was designed for. The CUP program was designed to provide technical assistance to communities that otherwise have no way to get the help. The way we do it is we reach out to all different kind of partners, federal agencies, colleges, nonprofits, GMA, which we've gotten information from GMA, and we find out who are the communities that need assistance. In some case, we're fortunate enough to come to meetings or conferences like this, and we get a chance to talk to people face to face, and they say, hey, Mike, I'd love to talk to you. And we get that information. We take your issues or concerns, and we have developed collaborations with colleges and universities to provide that technical assistance, because my opinion was colleges and universities are probably the greatest untapped resource in the country. There are millions of students that are really smart, that are really clever, that are really creative, and if given the opportunity, they'd probably like to help people that could desperately use the help. So that's who our primary partner is. So we take your issues, we go to a college or university, and we like to keep them close, and we say to the college and university, we would like you to take a look at this list of issues and identify which issues you can work on. Now, not all schools can do everything, but there's some things we do to help address that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we tell the college, reach out to particularly your seniors for capstone projects, your graduate students for practicum projects, some cases your juniors, and occasionally we've had some sophomores. And where those academic areas match up with the issues, give that issue to those students as a project for them to work on. Inculcate that into their course of study so that not only do they get the chance to work on it, but they're actually going to be graded on the work they do. So they've got a legitimate reason to do it. But it also gives those students the opportunity to put their education to work. The key was in doing this, we wanted to do it in a way that it was going to be long-term and lasting. And we have had lots and lots of communities I've talked to where the communities have said, had a college student come, it was great, they did a wonderful job, they left, ain't seen them since. If you're a small community and you need help, you didn't get into your situation overnight, you're not going to get out of it overnight. You need long-term assistance. So what we have told the colleges is, I don't have any money to give you, but what I do have to give you is an experiential learning opportunity that is not like anything you've ever done before. I got nothing against Home Depot, I got nothing against Google or Amazon or all the rest of the big companies. But what we told the students and the schools are, this is a chance to know that the work that you do is going to make a difference in the lives of the people that help you. This is not an exercise. This is not sitting in an office. This is doing real work for real people that if you didn't do it for them, they probably never get the help. It took us a little while to get started, but we've been able to prove to the schools this makes a difference in their communities. And at the same time, it gives those students a chance to put their education to work and put something on their resume. You know, if you got a 4.0, that's great. But when you go to get interviewed for a job, they're going to say, hey, that 4.0 is like really nice, but what can you really do? That's what they really care about. This program gives the students the opportunity to say, well, you know, I'm a business major, but I didn't just go to school. I did an economic development plan for the city of Midway, and this is what we did. It makes a difference when those students get interviewed and they get the job they want, not the job they need. And they need to get jobs because I'm closer to collecting Social Security than paying it. So I need them kids to get good jobs. It makes a difference when they get those jobs because now they get to work in the area they study and they get to do what they really want to do. So they get that great experiential learning opportunity. But most importantly, those communities get the help that they need. And the benefit is, because it didn't take money to bring the schools on board, the lack of money doesn't make them go away, and we can build relationships with these schools and communities year after year after year after year. So you get long-term support, not overnight support. We've also said that in a lot of these communities, it makes a difference when college students come into communities that are underserved. When you have communities that are poor and they see college students coming to their community to help them, that provides a model for those poor, the kids in those poor communities where they say, hey, you know, we must be somebody. We are important enough for these students to come here. And for the students, they get to understand that poor doesn't mean less than, it just means less resourced. Doesn't mean you're less of an American citizen, that you're less than a resident of the state of Georgia. It just means you don't have the resources. That's all. And we, the federal agencies, we get to expand the amount of help we give you without expanding the staff. I don't have to add more people to my staff to be able to pull these partnerships in. So we get help to the people that need it. We give college students an opportunity to put their education to work, all at the same time with not having to add to our staff. So yes, I am from the federal government. I am actually here to help. So this program started in 2013. We started with 4 schools. 2018, that number's out of date. We just added 2 over the last couple of weeks. We've got 75 schools helping 60 communities in 20 states. We've done a little over 150 projects. We've helped a little over 3 million people. The third bullet is the one I'm most proud of. Since 2013, the federal government spent about $3.5 million running this program. It's my salary and all my benefits, people I've had on loan to me, 1 permanent staff member that I have, our travel, that's everything over 5 years. And over that same 5-year period, we provided $33.5 million in direct support to communities. I'm not a math major, but that's almost 10 to 1. So for every one of your tax dollars that were paid to do this, we put $10 of value back into your community. That's getting value for your tax dollars. We've got other partners that we work with, EPA, of course EPA, but the Department of Interior, USDA, Department of Energy, we've got nationwide agreements with them. We have a collaboration with the Department of Education where, has anybody here ever heard of the Federal Work Study Program? Okay, so the Federal Work Study Program was created to provide stipends to poor students so they can get through school. What we've convinced the Department of Education is stop letting schools spend those stipends on kids working in the admin office or answering phones or in the finance office. Provide stipends for them to work on these projects because you're letting them get experience in the area of academic study and it's helping them get better jobs. And they have agreed with that. And in fact, they are reorienting the program in 2 directions. They want to see students work in industry, they want to see students work in communities. And they are full-throated supporters of this program. And we've got the Community Engineering Corps and the American Geophysics Union. The other thing I will talk about, and I mentioned earlier, your local school may not have the academic area that can help you. We have found out, quite accidentally actually, that colleges love working with other colleges. And I'll show you in one of the pictures, we actually had a 4-school collaboration, 4 schools from 3 different states that worked on a sewage issue in the Black Belt of Alabama. They have been trying to crack the code on that for decades. And these students came up with solutions not only for individual homes, but for clusters of homes. The value of the students' work goes towards the match requirement, and that'll enable them to go after a grant from USDA that if that pilot works, they will have cracked the code on that problem and they'll export that pilot across the Black Belt. So, let me talk about the Broadband Initiative. Almost 1 year ago today, I was invited to this conference and I happened to meet a guy by the name of Scott Woods. And Scott's talked about the mission of the NTIA, which was to help develop broadband plans for communities. And I was sitting right about where that gentleman right there with his arm crossed with the blue shirt was sitting. And I said, hey, that's pretty cool. How many people do you have to do that? He said, well, I've got 10, and I'm asking for 2 more. And I said, you have 12 people for the whole country? I said, Scott, we should talk at the break. So I said, I think it would really be a cool idea, instead of your guys racking up the frequent flyer miles, how about if we come up with an idea where your folks teach our colleges how to develop those broadband feasibility studies? And once the college learns how to do that, if one school does 2, 2 do 4, 4 do 8, 8 do 16, all of a sudden all these additional plans are getting done, and you didn't have to add to your staff to do that. Well, Scott just thought that was a great idea because he's a smart guy. See, I'm giving you got to be nice to me, okay? So he sent a info paper up through his leadership. I sent on what through mine. They thought that was a great idea, and we said, okay, let's set up a pilot, and we did. The pilot was set up in a place where the whole additional broadband issue came to my attention, which was in West Alabama. It got moved from January to September because of the shutdown, through no fault of our own. But Scott and his partner were there last week, yes, and conducted a 2+ day training course to a group of 12 students from 4 different academic areas on how to develop the broadband plans. And what's really cool about the broadband plan is we said, make sure you include everything. We all heard about the economic development part of that. The other part I wanted to make sure got included was the health piece. I don't hear enough people talking about the crisis in rural America where rural hospitals are closing like crazy. Broadband, putting in telemedicine is not a replacement for a hospital, but it is better than nothing. But you can't have telemedicine if you don't have broadband. So we said to the students, take a look at the health impacts too. We heard talk about the education. In rural communities where they don't have access to broadband, we are creating a class of students, and when they graduate from high school, they may never catch up. They may never be able to compete in the global marketplace. This is the United States. We can do better than that. So we said, make sure you include the education piece. Figure out where it should be, how big it should be, so we make sure that those kids got the same chance that everybody else. Because at the end of the day, everybody should have a chance to compete. It's not the kids' fault. We wanted to make sure that that was also included too. So we took a look at all those components, and we made sure we had students from all those different academic areas plus one that were included to help develop that plan. So when they work with the 2 cities that they're working with, they're looking at the economic development piece. They're looking at the health piece. They're looking at the education piece. They're looking at the IT piece on how to put that together. And their plan is to come up with, as was mentioned earlier this morning, that feasibility study. You heard them say, you gotta kind of have that to start with. If this pilot works, we will have figured out how to provide that for cities that otherwise couldn't afford to pay for this, so that you can at least get your foot in the door and get started. That's why this was, Scott recognized the importance it is right away. Like I said, he's much smarter than me. He said, this is a great idea. If this pilot works, we're gonna be able to eventually provide help to thousands and thousands and thousands of people in communities to get your foot in the door on moving towards access to broadband. And the thing that you need to get started with, it doesn't cost you anything to get it done. So the young man on the right was going after his master's degree in sustainability, and we were working at the Regional Coastal Commission. Alan Burns is the executive director, and one of the issues that Darien had was they had excess water in their sewage sludge. And if you know anything about utilities, when you're getting rid of sewage sludge, you're paying by weight and you're paying by volume. So when you got extra water, it's kind of a double whammy. You're paying twice. So that young man called me up on a Saturday morning. It was about 8:30. I mean, thank God I was awake, because if he'd have woke the wake up, that'd have been a whole nother conversation. And he said, Mr. Burns, have you ever heard of using a solar cell with that problem? I said, I never heard of that. If you want to try it, that sounds good to me. So he went to Home Depot with his mother's credit card, bought the materials from Home Depot, and came up with a model. That's the model that they're holding between him. And that model takes 30% of the water out of sewage sludge, no utility costs whatsoever. Saves the city a ton of money. And this was all on an idea. A young man called me up on Saturday morning. When he said, I was like, I almost said, what in the heck are you? But this is the power of youth. On the left-hand side, Tuskegee University, the Selma to Montgomery Trail. If you live in the middle of that trail, you are 47 miles from a supermarket. You are 53 miles from a hospital. If you have a heart attack, they will never get you to the hospital on time. The biggest problem is you don't have access to jobs or educational opportunities or fresh food. So the students from Tuskegee, Alabama came up with a extraordinarily creative loop within a loop transportation plan that will help solve that problem. And that picture, they actually went out and met the citizens at night and on the weekend to get their input on where the bus stops were. So that was the citizens picking where the stops were going to be. The coolest part was 5 of those bus stops were put on top of brownfield sites. So our brownfields office was able to come to the cities and the school and to teach them how to do economic development of brownfield sites. So even though we're still working to get the money to finish the planning and design, they already got a benefit by getting that training on how to redevelop brownfield sites. Is Farhad still here? There he is. So we were contacted by the city of East Point that they had a cybersecurity issue, and he started a collaboration. We set up a collaborative project with kids from Georgia State, which I think that collaboration continues to this day, right? Okay. So this is right after the city of Atlanta got hacked, and everybody was like, oh my God, what do we do? So we talked to Georgia State. They came in, they did a cybersecurity analysis, but they also did a training plan for the city employees, because it's really important to teach employees how to avoid opening the door for that. That final plan is so good, and if I say something wrong, please tell me. He's at an IT directors conference, and he mentions this to other IT directors. They're like, oh my God, can we get copies of that? And there are other cities in the state of Georgia that have benefited from the plan that was created by East Point because it was such a cool training plan. On the right is a student and professor from Savannah State University, the mayor of Midway, Georgia. Anybody from Midway? Okay. Mayor of Midway, Georgia, her city hall was in a strip mall. I walked past it 3 times. It was between the chicken shack and the check cashing place. I finally went to the chicken shack. I said, where's City Hall? The guy said, I watched you walk past it 3 times. I said, where's it at? It's right there. I go in and see the mayor. She says, Mike, she says, I've got land for a city hall, but I can't afford to pay for the design. I said, I think we can do that. So we asked Savannah State to do the design, but at the same time, we had a partnership with the American Geophysics Union, and they brought in a person with 25 years of experience, worked with the school and the city, and said, let's not just do a design. Let's take its design and let's make it green and sustainable. Let's put in solar panels. Let's put in a bioswale instead of a stormwater system. Let's put in green grass payers. Let's put in the use of recycled materials to help cut down the construction costs. That final design is so good that the mayor gets the drawing sealed for free by an engineer. She competes for and wins the CBDG funds to build that city hall. That all started with that young man and that professor. There were some additional students that helped with that. And that design was done for the mayor, didn't cost her a dime. The one on the right, again, this was a Superfund site in North Carolina. There was $12 million available for natural resources projects, but the city didn't even know that. So the person controlling the fund said, well, you guys going to ask for some of this $12 million? It's due in 4 months. They said, we didn't know that money was available. So the University of North Carolina in Wilmington not only helped put together the grant applications, but came in and taught the residents, said, we don't want you to just ask for the money. We want you to understand why this is important. You got a lot of people to do subsistence fishing. They need to understand natural resources helps protect the very food that you're catching to eat, and educated people on why it was important. This is the Black Belt Project. These were actually students from Clemson University that took a bus ride down to Alabama because they wanted to actually walk the ground and talk to people down there. This was the Black Belt Project I mentioned earlier. Like I said, no, I didn't include the picture from our stuff. I'm sorry. I should have added that in there. We have a very nice picture too with Scott and I in the picture, so I'll add that, I promise. The collaboration with NTIA to teach students how to develop those feasibility studies for your broadband projects, that is huge. The best part is we're doing it for communities for free. We're doing a pilot right now in West Alabama, and I'm reaching out to schools in the state of Georgia to pull them in because I would love to see some of the schools come in. We've got schools that we work with. We work with Coastal College of Georgia. We've worked with UGA at Tifton. We work with Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Clayton State. We've worked with a lot of different schools in the state of Georgia, but we wanted to make sure that this pilot worked before we exported it. Once we know probably the middle of November that this is going to work, we're going to be reaching out to the schools in Georgia to say, hey, if you guys are interested, I'm fairly certain that there's a cities that could use the help. So my contact information is here. If you're interested in being a part of what eventually will be a fairly widespread set of projects, let me know. If you're interested in the CUP program, in addition to what we're doing with broadband, please feel free to let us know. I do want to thank GMA for allowing us to make the presentation, and in fact, they do have the CUP program on the GMA website, so there's some additional information on GMA's website if you're interested. So, thank you, and thank you.
So really quick, we're almost finished. Again, Scott Woods from NTIA. Again, we've worked hand in hand. I wish Mike had some pictures. We had 12 students working in that collaboration, that pilot project with the University of West Alabama. They will be working with the cities of Livingston and York, which are very rural cities, to develop broadband feasibility plans for those areas. And that's going to fit in the overall master plan of the cities, as well as the Alabama strategic broadband plan, similar to what Georgia has adopted as well. So if, we look forward to working with some projects here in Georgia as we get, I know the pilot will work. I'm very certain about that. So I'm just going to go real quickly over what we do at Broadband USA. For those of you who attended the previous conference last year, this is not new information, but I just want to focus on the funding resources that we provide to communities, to local governments. All of this information, excuse me, is available on our website. GMA has a link to our website on its site. So please feel free to access any of those sites for the information that I'm about to cover. So really quickly, a little bit about NTIA for those of you who don't know. We're the federal government. We're here to what? Help. There we go. Thank you. All right, we're still up. We're focused really on 4 initiatives. We advise the executive branch on international and domestic telecommunications policy issues, really focusing on these 4 areas: expanding broadband access and adoption for all Americans, right? Expanding the use of federal spectrum by all users. Again, ensuring that the internet remains an engine for continued economic growth and development, and then supporting public safety communications. Specifically within Broadband USA, we do 3 things. We educate, we convene, we assist. We will come into your community. We will convene a meeting with all of your stakeholders from the education community, service provider community, your business community, and we facilitate strategic discussions around the needs that you've heard about today. What is it that my community needs, and how do we talk to the service providers in our locale so they can understand what we're talking about, and vice versa. We talk with and strategize on behalf of providers so that the local community can understand, what are the return on investment models that are needed. What are some of the information that the city can come to the table with that will serve as a catalyst for third-party investment to expand broadband infrastructure and attract outside investment. So we do all of that through our various programs at Broadband USA. To date, we've helped over 400 communities, unique communities across the nation. That includes community-specific, local governments, small providers, nonprofits. 71% of those we help with planning activities. Where do I get started? What do I do? What do I need to start a feasibility study? What does my customer base profile look like? What kind of base charges will my customer demographic support? So we help communities identify all of that information and put it all together. We also help with funding identification and activities, chief among which we produce a guide to federal funding of broadband projects. So we put together, and I'll talk about it in a second, all of the federal sources of funding that communities and local governments can apply to receive funding for broadband, digital inclusion, and access. We do that on one site. It's a PDF form. We update it in collaboration with entities like EDA. It covers the eligibility criteria. It covers all of the limits. And it's all your one-stop shopping, if you will, for information on federal sources of broadband grants and loans. We also coordinate and facilitate what we call a State Broadband Leaders Network. Dina is a member on behalf of Georgia, where there's a movement now in states where a lot of states have adopted broadband development offices to really talk about strategically for the state how to advance broadband infrastructure enhancement and developments, both as an industry and to help communities move forward. When we started this initiative, we only had 15 states in 2017. In roughly 2 years, we now have 46 states and territories as we stand right now in 2019. As you see right now, 31 of those states offer funding through the state legislature, some type of funding assistance to the states. And we help convene and coordinate those. So if you have any information, we collect information from Georgia, from Dina and that effort. So as soon as the state finalizes this new aid package, we'll reflect that in the documents from Georgia that we reflect and that we work with on our website. But again, just nationwide, you see there's a trend. 31 states now have state-specific broadband funding programs. And Georgia will be, as soon as that goes through, it'll be 32 with Georgia. So again, you heard me talk about, again, our guide to federal funding. We used to produce a booklet. Now we only do it on our website. You can download it via PDF, electronic medium. Again, all of the federal sources of broadband, all of the federal sources that support broadband, from a funding perspective, whether it's digital inclusion, broadband planning, infrastructure development, you name it. We've collected all of that information, and it includes the information regarding the purpose of the program, the potential restrictions on funding, and then the rules for eligibility. And so you'll have all of that information, including the contact information for who you need to contact for the representatives for those specific programs. Just for an example, 3 that we would talk about, we would highlight that would be included in the guide that are applicable for cities. I don't know if you know, but HUD has a Community Development Block Grant Program, which can be used for broadband deployment in HUD-supported housing programs. So if any of the cities you have HUD-supported programs that you're doing for middle and low-income housing, you can include a broadband component in those plans. We talked about the EDA with Mr. Corso. They have the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, as well as the other programs that he mentions that could be used for broadband planning and economic development. And then a segue to USDA's Reconnect Rural Broadband Program. Your local representative is Andrew Hayes, is the regional representative for the state of Georgia. That can be used for broadband infrastructure deployment in rural communities. If I'm not mistaken, the Reconnect program received 5 Georgia-specific applications in 2018 or 2019. And then this program is going through a phase 2 program with an additional $600 million for FY20, and the USDA is working on getting that information out as well. But these are the types of programs and the information that we provide in one source that you can get from our website. We'll talk a little bit about the RUS program. They have telecommunications loan and infrastructure programs and the Farm Bill program in addition to the Reconnect program. So 3 specific programs. These 2 are specifically for service providers. So again, one of the things that we do at NTIA is we help you engage in those discussions with your service providers so they can in then turn hopefully apply for some of these programs with help from the local jurisdiction for the information that they'll need to be successful. And so there are specific rural criteria. One of the things we don't do well in the federal government, there are 36 different definitions of rural for various federal programs. I know that doesn't help much, but we're trying to streamline those to ensure that at a minimum, rural actually means rural, and it doesn't mean something else. And then finally, just again, our website, www.broadbandusa.ntia.gov is available. One of the things that we do, I think we do very well, we do webinars every month, and I believe GMA is on our target list, where we put together information from thought and industry leaders every month. So webinar, it's live, you access it. You can also access it offline, the transcript, as well as the audio version. We did a comprehensive federal funding overview last October. You can still go to our website, you can download that webinar, you can listen to it. We had representatives from USDA, we had representatives from EDA, several other federal sources that talked about their agency-specific programs as it relates to broadband, digital inclusion, and access. Again, we have a number of different resources on our website. If you go to our website page, we have a products page, and you can get a lot of educational information that you'll need to arm not only yourselves, but your stakeholders about the benefit of broadband, how it can be used, digital inclusion and access, including what speeds you need, what speeds are recommended for different uses, what does a connected community look like, needs for smart agriculture. We talked a lot about smart cities today. Understand that has one definition when you're a city outside of metropolitan Atlanta, but if you're a rural city, that's another connotation. We talk about smart agriculture, what that looks like, the new technology that are driving American farms and livestock. So just all of you, please just look at our website for more information. Contact my office, contact me if you need technical assistance. I believe that we're a great place to start. We don't take the place of a consultant, but we are there to help you have more informed decisions. We are there to help you have more informed discussions with your local stakeholders, including the service provider community, your local politicians, your local business leaders. Please utilize us. We have not received a ton of assistance requests from Georgia yet, hence our partnership with GMA, and we hope to provide that assistance to you at no charge. You don't have to pay for our travel. I have a pretty healthy travel budget. Delta flies to Atlanta, and we can drive from there pretty easily. But again, we are a resource, and we are here, again, the proverbial phrase, to help. So thank you. All right, so I understand, and I do thank you for your patience. Just in the last few seconds, I'll try to get through this as fast as I can. I know folks want to get home. I'm going to talk about, on behalf of the USDA, their Reconnect Loan and Grant Program. So the status, everyone's familiar with the Reconnect Program? It's $550 million of program governed by USDA for broadband connectivity, infrastructure connectivity for both providers and communities, state governments, state, local governments, and the like. So USDA received $600 million for round one and currently received more than enough applications to use up 100% of the funding, right? Teams right now are being sent out in PSAs to complete service area validations, to confirm the eligibility of each PFSA program and requirements that cannot have access to broadband at a speed greater than 10.1 connectivity. Loan applications are determined to be financially feasible, and the grant applications that score enough to receive an award may still be found to be ineligible as a result of the work that they are doing in the field. So that's the disclaimer for the FY19. One of the big things that the Reconnect program is doing, and NTIA, we're helping them out, is we're partnering and going out with Reconnect workshops to really talk about the Reconnect program and foster more communities to submit applications. The Reconnect program website is right there, www.usda.gov/reconnect. They have the Reconnect program links for the events that are coming up. And then unfortunately, there are no planned Georgia workshops or near Georgia workshops at this time, due to the fact that Georgia had 5 communities that submitted applications. So DC said, based on sort of the demand of people knowing about and the complexity of the applications that were submitted, they instead targeted areas for the Reconnect workshops where they did not receive sufficient applications. So USDA determined that the 5 received from Georgia was indicative that no further, at least workshops, were needed in the Georgia area. There is one being planned, I believe, in the works for Mississippi. Right now, it's been Wyoming, New Mexico, Washington State, and a couple others I think are in planned for the upper Midwest right now. So you can find out information about the 5 Georgia applications on the applications map on the USDA.gov website. It shows each applicant's preferred funded service area. Once the application is approved, the status of the application will be identified on that website. So again, if you want any information about the Georgia applications, where they are in relation to your community, more information specifically about those applications, what they propose to serve, you can get that information from the USDA mapping site, the applications map that they call it, on their homepage. Okay. Again, the project details, I think Dovetail is one. We don't have to go through all of these, but if you click on it, that's the information that you'll get on each of the 5 applications that were submitted in the round 1 for the funding. Gives you the program type, the grant, the amount requested. Again, this is a grant program, not a loan program. Gives you information about the matching funds, the total project cost, the household information in terms of who has access, the population, square miles, congressional districts, a number of different collectible information that's layered in their mapping protocols that you can get information about. Right? So most importantly, round 2 funding for round 2 for fiscal year 2020, USDA receives an additional $550 million. That new funding opportunity announcement will be published once all the round 1 awards have been announced. The USDA's goal is to publish that round 2 announcement by the end of 2019, calendar 19. So hopefully by December, they'll announce the $550 million round 2 award and then encourage applicants. There'll be an application deadline for you to submit applications for that. Again, that's it. Told you, I did it in, 3 minutes. So, all right, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact my office. You can contact any of the CUP programs, Mr. Corso as well. We'll be happy to provide any additional information that we can. And so now for the closing, I will turn it over to Larry Hanson. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I do have a quick question for you, and I know you went through that very quickly, but I'm curious, and I understand having something is better than having nothing, but I saw on there as you went through that the standard was 10-1, and it said if any person had 10-1, that area would not be eligible, if I saw it correctly. And I know the FCC now defines high speed has to be 25.3, not 10-1. Is there any conversation about raising that standard? Because most people would say 10-1 today doesn't really meet the needs of communities going forward.
So that's a very good question. I will give you the perspective of NTIA because I don't cover USDA. But again, it's about the standard of what's required or available right now for rural.
Right.
And they set that threshold, the USDA set that threshold for rural connectivity. I can give you my personal thoughts offline about that. But again, that's the bureaucracy of the federal government. At times, we see that disconnect is that they set the 10-1 for the floor for rural to ensure that more areas would qualify and wouldn't be left off. Because if you set the 25.3 standard, then that's pretty much all of rural. But I think to Mr. Hanson's point, the FCC came out with the definition,
Right.
the industry standard definition of broadband is 25.3. So why the USDA would have
Right.
10-1?
Okay, well, appreciate that, and I think that's something we need to continue to monitor and look, because obviously more would be eligible, and it's sort of like the conversation this morning about the size of the pipe, and you put a water line in the ground, you don't put it in the ground to serve one customer, you put it in there to serve an area in the future, and there was conversation this morning about undersizing fiber or conduit, and it's the same thing. If we build something to 10-1 today and it's almost outdated or doesn't meet the needs by the time it's there, who have we really served? How well have we really utilized grant money and local investment to match it? That was really my question about it, and perhaps we just need to have that conversation. But I want to thank you all for being here today, and I want to tell you that our goal at GMA is to keep our membership informed about resources that are available. You've heard a lot today. We want to help you help your communities grow and have the necessary infrastructure you need to have the best quality of life that you can. You've heard from a lot of great speakers today, a lot of information thrown at you. That information will be available to you. And I just, in closing, want to, on behalf of GMA, thank you for your presence, thank you for your attendance, and let us know how we can continue to help you in the future. Thank you very much.